When recognized to speak, unmute your microphone and connect your video. Members may make use of the icons on the bar at the bottom of their screens, which as an option allows a member to put his or her hand up to raise a point of order. The Secretariat will assist me in identifying those members. And when using the virtual system, members are urged to refrain or desist from unnecessary points of order or interjections. Lastly, I wish to remind you that we are meeting in a mini plenary session, and therefore any decisions will be taken in a full plenary session of the National Assembly. The first item on the order paper is a subject for discussion in the name of the Honourable M Gungubele on non-racialism and social cohesion for a prosperous South National Assembly. I now recognise the Honourable Gungubele. The first item on the order paper is a subject for discussion in the name of the Honourable M Gungubele on non-racialism and social.
Before I begin my address today, good afternoon to honourable members. Let me take the opportunity to remind the nation that President Ramaphosa, His Excellency, has asked us to wear a black armband or other signs of mourning in the upcoming week. This is to signify our respect for those who have departed due to either COVID-19 or gender-based violence and femicide. In 1985, in Harare, during an interview with Julie Fredericks for her book, The Unbreakable Truth, Non-racialism in South Africa, former Judge Albie Sachs profoundly asserted that non-racialism, I open quote, non-racialism is not just a bland thing. It is not just an absence of racism. That view is empty. In fact, the reality of the developing a non-racial culture in South Africa is much richer than that. It is much more active and more dynamic. Non-racialism doesn't mean that it is a society of non-something. It means that you are eliminating all the apartheid barriers and creating a South Africa where everyone has access and belongs. But it doesn't describe the quality and personality of the country and the people. This is not a non-something. That is something, and that is South Africa, South African personality that is being constructed, close quote. In line with this view expressed by Judge Sachs, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development defines a cohesive society as that society which works towards the well-being of all its members, fights exclusion and marginalization, creates a sense of belonging, and promotes trust, offers its members the opportunity of upward mobility, that is, rising from a lower to a higher class of status. We remain concerned about the pace of the progressive realization of social cohesion in our country as defined by Judge Sachs and the OECD. Honorable Chairperson, the debate today underscores the fact that we're a country confronted by a myriad of challenges. These challenges are human development related and will not be able to address these without the theme of today's debate. The time at which we are having this debate is not only opportune, but is also relevant because it affords us an opportunity to pause, analyze, reflect, and grapple with the meaning of what confronts us and seeks to derail our nation building and social cohesion project. We need to learn to be an engaging nation instead of being one that is confrontational, misunderstanding, and violent. Honorable members, we can all agree that what transpired in Seneca and Brackenfell can never happen again, we hope so. Neither should we shy away from condemning how some leaders amongst ourselves responded to both incidents. It cannot be correct that a delicate process of constructing a South African personality, as aptly described by Judge Albie Sachs, is undermined by some amongst us. We cannot have leaders in society undermining a process that is so sacrosanct and is underpinned by values as set out in the Constitution. A Constitution which enjoins us, each and every one of us, to build, unite, and foster prosperity among South Africans. We must be able to rise above as leaders in this country and engage on the prevailing conditions which have led to this debate today. We must be solution-oriented and not fail into a trap of polarizing and sowing disunity amongst our people. We must, as a nation, elevate the level of discussion and unite in our fullness and diversity. We must commit to the progressive transformation of our country as prescribed in our Constitution. Our Constitution, honorable members, is underpinned by the values of human dignity, non-sexism, non-racialism, and the rule of law. All of these are important tenets that demonstrate that we cannot separate our prosperity from our nation-building pursuit and social cohesion project. Honorable Chairperson, with your permission, I would like to refer to a famous aphorism written in 1930s by Antonio Gramsci, which he opened down in his prison notebooks that, open quote, the crisis precisely consists in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear, close quote. This quote was recently used by Jane Kelsey, a professor of law, into a submission at the Fourth People's Health Assembly, contextualized this and argued that our modern day morbid symptoms include huge inequality, poverty, and instability, amongst others. Honorable members, let me bring the above mentioned into context. Former President Mbeki once noted that there are three strategic tasks to execute in pursuit of our national democratic revolution. These are political freedom, which we realized in 1994, dealing with the legacy of apartheid, and lastly, building a new South Africa. Over the past 26 years, this is the society that the ANC has been tirelessly working towards. We hope that this debate today will help us work together amongst ourselves, the entire South Africa, to pursue this noble cause. However, the dialectical relationship of struggle and progress as underpinned by Antonio Gramsci of the old dying and the new struggle to be born is relevant to the current debate. The vestige of our colonial and apartheid past, as stubborn as they are dying. Our national democratic society is struggling to be born. Honorable members, in addition to what Professor Jane Kelsey identified as modern day morbid symptoms, the interregnum caused by the persistent nature of the vestige of our colonial and apartheid past and the building of national democratic society has motivated today's debate. These modern day morbid symptoms in our country find expression in stubborn biggest inequality gap in the world, rising levels of poverty and unemployment, and a culture of violence. We need to free ourselves from all forms of racial, tribal, and ethnic mistrust and lean on the enduring phenomenon of human triumph. It is the freedom from all the above morbid symptoms that a coherent, consistent, predictable societal environment can unleash our human potential. We need to get to the root of the obstinate factors which continue to sustain our divisions and not just deal with the symptoms which we have recently seen in Senegal and Brackenfell. The unity of this country, Honorable Chair, cannot be an exclusive task of a particular race. It is a task that belongs to all of us as South Africans. Honorable members, we need to understand why, according to South African Human Rights Commission, that most of the reports that it received last year were race-related. This report indicates that the majority of complaints are 38% from Gauteng, 15% from Western Cape, and 14% from KwaZulu-Natal. We need, Honorable Chair, to interrogate why, according to the baseline survey conducted by the Foundation for Human Rights, that 44% of adults had no trust in people of other race groups, while 45% felt that they had been discriminated against based on race. Against this work by the South African Human Rights Commission, we need to understand how we can take forward the positive revelation by the Institutes of Race Relations that the racial goodwill amongst our people remains strong. It is our task as South Africans to ensure that we collectively fight what Gramsci calls the morbid symptoms if we are to remain true to that which binds us as a nation, our constitution. It is our collective responsibility to ensure that we work towards that which is envisioned in the NDP, that is transforming society and uniting the country. That we work towards being South Africans who are more conscious of the things we have in common than our difference. That we inculcate broad-based knowledge that support our shared values. That we lead an inclusive society. That we increase our interactions amongst each other across social and racial groups. We truly and partially develop the capabilities of the historically disadvantaged, and we use our constitution to transform South Africa into a more equitable, integrated, and just society. Honorable members, all of this requires of us to work together, demonstrate strong leadership across society, and encourage an active and responsible citizen. I call upon all South Africans to imprison themselves in a dream of a South Africa that works towards the well-being of its citizens, which is a conqueror of exclusion and marginalization. South Africa that will have secured all its people a sense of belonging, that will be grounded on the bedrock of trust within itself, that will be offering all its people opportunities of upward mobility. In closing, Honorable Chair, our constitution is an upward ladder to the dream, is an upward ladder to the dream nation, which our forebears laid their lives for. I am calling upon beg your pardon. I'm calling upon all those who are at the top to hold tight the ladder and not kick it, and those at the bottom to climb the ladder and not mock it. The future must be constructed now, not in future. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Gungubele. I will now recognize the Honorable Mbele, who is the next speaker. The Honorable Mbele.
Ngiyabonga, Sihlalo ngaphambili. It is ironic that today's subject for discussion on non-racialism and social cohesion in South Africa should take place the day before what is anticipated to be a racially charged and tense standoff in Brackenfell, Cape Town tomorrow. Chairperson, it is a very sad day in our country when schools become the sites of such racial hostility and anonymous displays. A scenario that echoes similar and equally abhorrent flashpoints in the early 1990s, when there were also racially charged standoffs outside some formerly whites-only schools as they started to desegregate. Our schools are supposed to be places where children learn the basic skills, knowledge, and in part, positive values to become contributing and upstanding members of society. They are meant to be a springboard into a productive future, not a boomerang back to our divided past. Our responsibility as leaders is not to stoke and intensify animosities, but rather to set the example, dialogue and respectful engagements that promotes understanding and broad commitments to reach solutions for the many problems that we face. In a country with the divisions and inequalities inherited from our colonial and apartheid past, it is all too easy to exploit the fault lines in our society. Conflict is easy, divisiveness is easy, racial mobilization, scapegoating is easy. But that is not what South Africa needs, especially at this time of economic hardship and dwindling prospects for a better future for many households. Many South Africans still carry in their hearts and minds the emotional scars of our past, in the same way that much of our landscape carries the spatial scars inherited from our past. But then the question is whether we simmer and stew in racial resentments and zero-sum thinking that some must lose in order for others to gain, or do we pursue a more productive path, a higher road, under enlightened leadership that will promote broad-based prosperity. The fundamental question, Chairperson, is, are we seeking to relive our divided past, or are we seeking to build a common future? The contours and contents of that common future are clearly contained in the preamble and founding provisions of our Constitution as a vision of our desired destination. It is a common future in which South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. A common future where we all recognize the injustices of our past, but have also healed the divisions of that past. A common future where we uphold human dignity, freedom in an open society, and non-racialism and non-sexism. Our responsibility as leaders is to draw the roadmap to achieve that vision, to build the vehicle that will take our country to that destination, and to bring South Africans along on that journey. But we must be under no illusions. It is a long and difficult journey. And thus, it is imperative to draw from the wisdom of the African proverb that if we want to walk far, then we have to walk together. In order to achieve social cohesion, we first have to achieve social inclusion. And in order to achieve that, we need to achieve economic inclusion. Colonialism and apartheid weaponized the contrived constructs of race to engineer our society's current socio-economic conditions of racial disparities in wealth and income. Our responsibility is to undo that material legacy and the paradigm of racialism which underpinned it. Where they operated through asset stripping and land dispossession, we must heal the scars through small business development, sustainable land reform, and the issuing of title deeds. Where they operated through providing inferior education and the deprivation of economic opportunities, we must heal those scars through providing quality education, especially to learners from our poorest communities, as well as creating and broadening skills developments and job opportunities in the context of a growing and labor-absorbing economy. This massive endeavor, Chairperson, requires implementing good governance to build a capable state with no corruption or mismanagement. The capable state that is clean, that is efficient and effective is the primary vehicle to get us to our destination of social cohesion and inclusion. Furthermore, we need improved service delivery and economic growth that results in shared prosperity. And it's that shared prosperity which will be the foundation for meaningful and lasting social cohesion. But we can only achieve that social cohesion through a non-racialism that celebrates our diversity, upholds our individuality, and does not turn people against each other. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Next speaker is the Honourable Tambo.
Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, allow us to...
Members, the next speaker is the Honourable Tambo.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Am I audible? House Chair.
Proceed, Honourable Member.
Thank you very much. House Chair, allow us to first register our expectation that a motion of this nature has been brought to this House by the Honourable Gungubele and of course endorsed by the Democratic Alliance. As a member of the House who has with great skill exhibited his lack of understanding complex subjects, and his submissions have been characterized by emptiness and a nauseating desire to sing for his supper. Nevertheless, it remains the duty of the EFF to rise above a shallow understanding of political concepts and place them in their correct context. This is in order to dismiss attempts to suppress the genuine dissent of our people by calling on them to subscribe to a non-racialism that is not a product of equality and justice. As a starting point, we must impress on the Honourable Gungubele that one cannot simply speak non-racialism into existence. It is this very mistake of thinking that the hopeful wishes in one's head constitute objective reality that has recently led to many Black people being humbled to the fact that we are forgiven a race of people who have no remorse for the exploitation they have subjected our people to. House Chair, non-racialism and social cohesion are not possible without changing the ownership patterns of our economy and confronting the arrogance that underpins racists who have turned Black identity to one of subservience and servitude. To break down in simple terms the concept of dialectics, non-racialism is not possible, is only possible as the end product of a direct confrontation with the primary contradiction of African society. It will take a radical and developmental policy perspectives to defeat this contradiction and give birth to what the great Pan-Africanist Robert Sobukwe deemed a world with a more human face. The primary contradiction facing South African society today, which gives birth to various social ills, is white supremacy and its economic and cultural dominance over the majority Black people. It is the failure of this government to distribute wealth equally that makes non-racialism impossible. It is the control of over 80% of this country's land by a white minority that makes non-racialism impossible and social cohesion impossible. It is the fact that our mothers and grandmothers clean flushing toilets in the day and go home to use pit toilets at night that makes social cohesion impossible. It is the white racists of this country who remind us day after day that non-racialism is impossible. They do this by killing our children because they regard them as monkeys, and by storming our courts with guns, and by paying farm workers with alcohol. It is the presence of disdain in our national anthem, which was sung as the flesh of Black people burned rice stands during apartheid, that makes social cohesion impossible. It is the very arrogant white minority that spits in the face of this regime's naive attempts at non-racialism by declaring that there are no go areas for Black people in this country and celebrating schools who have exclusively white teachers and organize exclusively white matric parties. All of this is possible because racists are emboldened under this regime, which makes superficial attempts at uniting a country that is characterized by racial separate development. It is tiptoeing around these painful realities that makes the rhetoric of social cohesion a mere dummy to be forced down the throats of the millions of Black people in this country whose quality of life is less than that of a dog of a white person. The Honorable Gungubele therefore represents the most liberal and reactionary element of the ANC. He represents the core of what was known as the South African Native Congress, an arrangement the likes of Anton Lambert condemned to be a collaboration of gentlemen who pleaded for a seat at the table of colonialists in their own land. We must follow in the footsteps of those determined Africanists who refuse to be part of a unity which is at the expense of justice. As a generation, we must forge our own path, and this path must struggle to create a genuine non-racialism. This non-racialism will only be possible should we correct the original sin against our people. This is through the expropriation of land without compensation. Social cohesion can only be achieved once we remove the symbols and statues that glorify white racists, whose legacy is that of bloodshed and dispossession of the land of African people. We can only achieve non-racialism once we allow a capable and radical state to nationalize the mines, the banks, and the strategic sectors of our economy, and allow meaningful participation in the economy by those who constitute the majority in our country. Therefore, we must not be led by the likes of Honorable Gungubele, who simply do not comprehend the concepts they speak about. Our posture must be that social cohesion is only possible through justice and equality, and this can only be achieved if those who currently control the means of production subject themselves to the will of African majority and share the wealth of our land. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Singh.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. Let me start off by saying nothing is impossible. If it was possible to defeat apartheid, which was so abhorrent in our country, then anything is possible. It's going to take will from all of us. It's going to take changing of hearts and minds. Chairperson, we are constantly being inundated by reports of racial polarization in our country. Now more than ever, we need to talk as South Africans about social cohesion. All South Africans need to join this discussion, and we need to be prepared to listen to each other, no matter how difficult this conversation may be. Honorable members, in inviting everyone to this discussion, to have an honest conversation, we cannot sow further racial tension, stigmatize and stereotype cultural groups. By referring to some cultural minorities as visitors to this country, we exclude them from the outset to the discussion. and we create further barriers in reaching respect and celebrating our diverse society. This matter lies very near to my heart, Honorable Chairperson, because I and my family have never believed in seclusion or exclusion. In my oral follow-up question to President Ramaphosa on 11 November on the topic of social cohesion, I emphasized that we talk a lot on the subject, but action still eludes us. I emphasized to the President that the community by numbers, a cultural minority group in South Africa, contributed immensely to the social fabric of our country, all minorities. I specifically asked the President his views on prominent leaders referring to cultural minorities as visitors rather than citizens of this country. And he said, and I quote, "We are all South Africans. If we say others are minorities, who are the majorities?" Close quote. Once you begin that notion, you begin having a sense that the other are less important. He emphasized that he would like to see us to see one another as South Africans first and embrace one another as South Africans. Chairperson, the IFP strongly believes we have to find a way to unite in our diversity. This is not an easy task. The reality is that there will always be smaller groups and larger cultural groups by numbers and diversity in viewpoints. This, however, cannot be used to stigmatize, dominate, and exclude certain groups from the conversation. Yes, we should fight against racialism and sexism in all its undertones, but we can do this together. It will call on us to look at our own views and those of our family and friends, and require each of us to reach out to someone from a different cultural or linguistic group. It means each of us needs to be willing to listen and respect each other. It's not going to be an event. It's going to be a process that starts at our schools. I'm reminded here, Honorable Chairperson, of a Sanskrit, and Sanskrit is the world's oldest language, a word Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which is a social philosophy capturing the notion that the whole of humanity is one family. Honorable members, the COVID-19 global pandemic has shown that more than ever, humanity needs to stand together. Let us all as South Africans stand together in our humanity. Let us find our common humanity to embrace one another. It is possible. It will take the will and the commitment from each one of us. I thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable C.P. Mulder.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, I would like to start off by thanking the Honorable Gungubele for bringing the subject for discussion to the House. I think it's a very laudable subject, and I think, unfortunately, that a debate like today will not be the end of this kind of discussion. I think it's absolutely necessary that we perhaps find different structures or discussion groups to take this issue further. I think it's absolutely essential. The topic for today deals with non-racialism and social cohesion for a prosperous South Africa. So if I can argue from the other side, yes, we all want to create a prosperous South Africa to the benefit of all South Africans. And how do we want to achieve that? By having a non-racial state and then through social cohesion. Now, when I come to non-racialism, I would like to start off with the holy grail of all documents for the ANC, the Freedom Charter itself, as adopted at the Congress of the People at Kliptown on 26 June 1955. And I quote, "We the people of South Africa declare for all our country and the world to know that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, and that no government can justly claim authority unless it is based on the will of all the people." In both instances, very strong emphasis on the term all. Then I go to the founding provision of the Constitution, Chapter 1, Section 1B, which says clearly that our state is a state founded on certain values. And one of those values is the whole idea of non-racialism. And I don't think there's anyone in South Africa that would not be in favor of non-racialism. There may be some who favor racialism. I've recently heard some speeches that sound very racialist in that sense. But I think the majority of South Africans are reasonable people, and they do not believe in anything else than non-racialism. However, when we get to the Equality Clause, which says equality includes the full and equal enjoyment of all rights and freedoms, then it goes on to make the exception that certain measures can be taken, and that takes us to Black economic empowerment, that takes us to affirmative action. And my concern is that we currently do have a very racialized society, where some people feel excluded and some feel that they are not part and parcel of the greater nation of South Africa. Both the President last week during the question time and the Honorable Gungubele today referred to the metaphor of a ladder. I understand that that ladder should be there, it should be held up and allow people who are not on top of the building or in top of society to climb the ladder. It shouldn't be pushed back. But there's a fundamental misunderstanding about the situation. It's not correct to think that people belonging to one group or one racial group are on top and all the other people at the bottom belongs to a different racial group. That is not currently the reality of South Africa. Let me get to social cohesion. Very important. But what is the problem? Why don't we have social cohesion? Why do we always talk about that? I believe true nation building and social cohesion will not succeed if we merely continue to stumble from one sporting event to the next without successfully creating a sense of belonging amongst all our peoples. We've had numerous sporting events, and then there's a wonderful expectation and everybody is excited about being South African, and that dwindles. As long as we do not find real unity in our diversity, we will not succeed with nation building. We need to reach out and use that as the building blocks to form a stable democratic dispensation, because without that, we will not have social cohesion. And my problem is, because we have such a vast amount of racism in South Africa, and it comes from different places and from different sides. No, it does not come from me. I can assure you definitely not so. You're completely wrong. I see racism from one side, and I don't think that's a good idea. The fact of the matter is, in the end, South Africa needs to have social cohesion. Without that, we will not succeed. We are in favor of that. Further discussion. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
No, thank you very much, Honourable Member. I will request the Honourable L. Moss to mute the microphone, please. You are causing a disturbance in the sitting. I now recognize the Honourable Makwacha, who is the next speaker. The next speaker is the Honourable Makwacha.
Honourable Mkachwa.
Okay, while we try to find the Honourable Member, let's continue and proceed to the Honourable Sukas. I will recognize the Honourable Makwacha when the connection has stabilized. The Honourable Sukas, are you ready?
Honourable Chair, I am here. I'm actually in Parliament. I'm not sure why my connection is unstable.
Okay, I will request then the Honourable Makwacha to continue. Continue, Honourable Makwacha.
Apologies for that, Chair. I am in Parliament in the actual precinct. I don't know why my connection's unstable, but yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Honourable Chairperson, honourable members, but most importantly to the many South Africans watching from home, good afternoon. I come before you as a young Black woman born a year before this nation and its people were granted the freedom and democracy that was stripped of her. When I look into the history of this country and I listen to the stories of my mother, my aunts, my grandmother, when I listen to the stories of the many women who were incarcerated at the women's jail, which is now referred to as the Constitutional Hill, it is impossible for me not to have a great sense of gratitude and appreciation for the times in which I am born. Beneath the St. George's Cathedral here in Cape Town, around the corner from Parliament, I once stumbled upon an exhibition one evening with my mother. The exhibition included images of various marches around the 1980s, where thousands of South Africans from different races gathered in the call for the liberation of South Africa. As I walked from one image to the next, and I saw a number of recognizable individuals, amongst them was our beloved President, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa. One was filled with a great sense of emotion. And essentially in that moment, one, like in many moments, was reminded of the perturbing and vicious journey that the people of this nation have had to endure for us to have this freedom that we today have. But what was of greater pain and is of continued agitation is the fact that we continue to take for granted our history as we perpetually undermine the sweat, blood, and lives that this country is founded upon. Maafrika Mahle, honorable members, at what point will we begin to unapologetically and ceaselessly defend, protect, and fight for the South Africa that our foremothers, Omaxeke, Omadigizela, Nomatumela, envisaged? At what point will we defend the values enshrined in the Freedom Charter, the Women's Charter, and our world-acclaimed Constitution? Every time one walks into this august house and looks at the history narrated by the walls of this building and takes in everything that surrounds this building, I mean, even the infrastructure, one is reminded of the fact that when this building was constructed, one's presence in it was never imagined. However, when I see the many women and young people across all benches of the house, I'm encouraged by a sense of hope and faith. But the increased representation in this house means nothing if we're unable to translate it to a truly lived experience of a socially cohesive, non-racial and non-sexist South Africa. Honorable members, no single one of us in this house can give room to any tendencies that seek to undermine the gains of our democracy. By inculcating the regressive behavior that we've seen at Brackenfell High School, at Pretoria High School for Girls, at St. Mary's DSG in Pretoria, in Senegal, within the cricket fraternity, recently within the netball fraternity, with the GBV and femicide pandemic, and the brutal treatment of our people at times by our very own police. It is in light of this that social institutions such as the church, the mosque, schools, sports clubs, civic organizations, amongst others, must be used to drive the agenda of a socially cohesive and socially connected South Africa by affirming the democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. But allow me to park on the role of social institutions in the form of learning institutions such as schools and universities, and the role they ought to be playing in terms of achieving the above-mentioned agenda. You see, we need to understand that basic education in the form of the curriculum and the co-curriculum is not intended to solely provide skills and knowledge and keep children fit, perhaps, but it is equally intended to shape, form, and harness the youth of this country. As such, we must agree with Paulo Freire, as I paraphrase what he says, when he says, to transform the experience of educating into a matter of simple techniques, or into a matter of, the technical ability to, for example, develop software, is to impoverish what is fundamentally human in this experience of teaching and learning. He essentially says that to reduce the experience of teaching and learning to technicalities and assessment is to deny the journey. So it's to deny the experience of teaching and learning from its capacity to form the human person. Honorable members and members of the education fraternity, if we have any serious regard for what it means to be human, we would understand that the moral formation of learners cannot be separated from the teaching of content. And taking into consideration that we want a responsive education in South Africa to address the current social ills and social collisions in building a socially cohesive South Africa, let us continue to ensure that our education system and the class experience of learners highlights and discusses the concrete reality of their lives. I urge us to continue our efforts of establishing an intimate connection between knowledge considered basic to any school curriculum and knowledge that is the fruit of the lived experience of these learners and students as individuals. You see, Paulo Freire, honorable members, challenges the experience of teaching and learning to discuss political and ideological realities in society, to raise class-related ethical questions that need to be looked into. And noting this, and I hope the Honorable Chief Whip is sitting in our mini-plenary, I am mind-boggled by individuals who still today uphold pragmatic beliefs that the role of the school is simply to transfer knowledge. You see, this type of belief will breed citizens who, when granted opportunities to deliver, for example, infrastructure such as student accommodation, those student accommodations, they will decay and collapse, not because they don't have the skill to build and construct these particular infrastructure, but because they have used the wrong materials or material of lesser quality because of this particular internal greed and a lack of social consciousness and a social will to build infrastructure that will ultimately contribute to the sustaining of the education system in ensuring that young people have the necessary skills and knowledge to be active participants of our economy. So you see, the journey of teaching and learning is greater than what we think it is. And so it must be protected from racial polarization and institutional cultures that dominate and undermine the diversity of the cultures, knowledge, and traditions engraved in our diverse nation. You see, We need citizens that are skilled and knowledgeable to be active participants of our economy, citizens that are able to locate their existence, identity, and role in the being and development of South Africa, citizens that are motivated to solve the problems of South Africa, believing and assured that their interventions and innovations will find meaningful expressions within the system, citizens that will shape and give direction to the political and social identity of South Africa. Thus, we need an education system that will inculcate an understanding among young people and citizens at large that my role in this world is not simply that of someone who registers what has occurred, but someone who has an input into what happens. Our education system must teach young people this so that when it is not happening, when we don't see the betterment of our people taking place, and in their lived experience, we can then continue to advocate for it and fight for that particular reality. It is as such that as a collective, we must work together to ensure that the content of our education is underpinned by humanism. Let us ensure that the content in our textbooks is as intersectional as all the colors of the rainbow as we negate all sexist conduct that discriminates against the LGBTQIA+ community. Let us embed in our academic content the values of creating a non-racial society, negating patriarchal practices which manifest in the increase of gender-based violence and femicide and in our male-dominated economy. You see, learning is a lifelong journey. So perhaps one should take this moment to address a matter that has really put me at ease, has not put me at ease for the last couple of months that I've been on these benches. Identity plays a very critical role in defining a people and their culture. Therefore, factually and accurately telling a people who they are, where they come from, and what they have done plays a fundamental role in how they locate and position themselves in the now and in the future. So, Honorable Boshoff, you know, I want to ease a perception or what I perceive to be a phobia of the FF+ in saying that when we speak of the inclusion and promotion of indigenous knowledge systems, as we equally challenge the colonial and Western dominated makeup of knowledge systems and pedagogy, with a better understanding of the importance of a broadened and dynamic thinking, as the African National Congress, we do not seek to eradicate, Western history and knowledge systems. That would be to our detriment, because history in the manner in which it is told should not distort our understanding of reality, such that it impairs our resolve as a nation to address the injustices of the past and to curb the reproduction of patriarchy, racial polarization, and economic inequality. But honorable members, what we really seek to say to you as the African National Congress today is that as a nation, we should engage in critical and social dialogue, which forges social cohesion, for social compacting in the hope and aspirations of creating a prosperous South Africa for all. I say this to you all this afternoon in the undying spirit of Thomas Sankara, who said his people should build their own railway, in the name of the President Oliver Tambo, the name of Nelson Mandela, and the living spirit of President Thabo Mbeki, forever forward and never backwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Sukas. The Honourable Sukers.
Honourable House Chair, it's Honourable Thring here from the ACDP.
Yes.
I believe that Honourable Sukas is having some challenges connecting. Am I able to then continue with the speech?
Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, sir. Honourable House Chair, the race has become the political weapon of our time to drive social change. The greatest book ever written provides reconciliation as the antidote to racial division and social incohesion. The men and women in this room carry a moral responsibility to lead the charge in uniting our people against an enemy that seeks to perpetuate racism and destabilize this nation. We cannot erect altars of injustice in the name of racial justice. Until we have dealt with our own demons and pain as leaders, it is impossible for us to drive reconciliation, transformation, and unity, which are the key elements of building a social cohesive society. Reconciliation does not mean that we deny the pain of millions of our people who have suffered because of segregation and exclusion on the basis of race, but it means that we recognize the evils of it, that which plummeted generations into the abyss of poverty and stripped our people of their dignity. But we must not use the past as a political weapon to destabilize and create chaos in our country. Racism is the evil of denying humanity of a person and assigning value on the basis of color. The South Africa in which my generation grew up is scarred psychologically and burned into our memories classism based on race. The greatest victory is to overcome that pain and the humiliation we had suffered as a people, and for us to become champions for the future we hope to create. True leadership means that we must take care to seek for the welfare of all of our people, regardless of their race. Today in South Africa, more than 18 million people face food insecurity. Here in the Western Cape, families face evictions on farms they have lived on for their whole lives. Homelessness and economic abandonment of women and children is at the heart of gender-based violence. It is not color that we fight, it is injustice. And until we recognize the pain of another human being as our own, we will never be able to move towards a South Africa that belongs to all who live in her. There is a call for the Western Cape to be secluded, away from the rest of South Africa. That call is because of political expediency and has become a substitute for real leadership. In the absence of moral leadership, we have a nation becoming more fragmented day by day. The ACDP calls on this House today for us to recognize the desperate need for all political leaders to unify this nation. Our enemy is not our brothers. It is the giants of our time, poverty, inequality, and other ills that rob our people from having a fair chance at a full and dignified life. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Sheikh Imam. The next speaker is the Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Allow me to start off with a quote. And this Honourable Chairperson is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, last sermon in Mount Arafat in 632 AD. And he states, an Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. A white person has no superiority over a black person, and a black person has no superiority over a white person, except by piety and good action. Now, the question is, House Chair, not long ago, 59 million people in South Africa have been praising the role of our former icon Madiba in uniting South Africa, referring to us as the Rainbow Nation, who fought and suffered 27 years in isolation to liberate us so that we could be one united nation. What has happened to that? Have we not learned from the oppression of the past based on race and color? Why is racial intolerance in South Africa increasing at the rate it is? It is because this is fueled by politicians and political parties working on the divide and rule policy to become popular. And you saw what happened with popular votes with Donald Trump in the United States of America. It's only a matter of time when popularity collapses. Now, racism has and divide and rule policy that even the apartheid regime promoted during the days of apartheid seems now to have begun with Black South Africans. We are all South Africans. We all have equal rights. We all belong to this country, whether we were born here or not born here. If our forefathers were here, came here, and who went through difficult times, Honorable House Chairperson, for us. This country was not all through whites or through colors. No, we all came through as one united nation. Now, the different groups that we have in South Africa, the different racial groups, are being used by politicians and political parties with an agenda to want to get vote and support. And this is what it is about. Now, let me tell you where this is leading to. Eventually, it is the whites, then it is the Indians, then it is the coloreds Then it will be the Xhosas and the Zulus and the Sothos and the Ndebele. This is where it is going to go to. Why are we not able to put our differences aside and come together as one united nation? We have a hard-fought fight that is behind us that we put in the struggle. Can we not put our differences aside? Now, let me tell you what is happening today. We talk about abuse by race groups in South Africa. There is racial abuse among blacks on blacks in South Africa. Racism exists amongst all the different races, amongst the Indians, among the coloreds, among the whites, among the blacks as well. It does exist. This is something that is in the system, in the genes, which is not easy to remove. But what should we be doing? We should be taking advantage of the lessons we have learned from where we've come from, what has happened pre-1994, so that we can work collectively as one united nation with all the challenges and difficulties we are having in the country. A loss of one person, irrespective of their race in South Africa, is one too many. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honorable Mananiso. The next speaker is the Honorable Mananiso.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me start by addressing Honorable Tambo to say that he has started on a wrong footing. One must say that all of us, when we started in this parliament, we were given constitutions so that we must remind ourselves who we are in the parliament. Chairperson, honorable members, let me congratulate those who have emerged victoriously as our people representative at the local sphere of government. My message to them is that they must never forget the process that made them to be trusted by the masses. I would like them to join the August House in upholding to the principle of activist citizens. Our people must not suffer nor lead themselves in resolving issues that need their interventions as servants. The ANC reaffirms its commitment to building a united, cohesive society in our January 8th statement of 2020, which noted the following. The ANC agrees that all of us, we must work together in terms of bridging the divisions amongst us as Africans, whether economical, social, political, or cultural. We must also work to end all forms of racism, sexism, tribalism, and chauvinism. To build a united society requires that we recognize the injustices of the past, agree on the task we must undertake to achieve proper redress. To Honorable Mbele, I hope what you said in terms of working together, we would continuously tell your members of the DA that we will indeed achieve more if we hold each other hand by hand and work together. It means that we must recognize the equal right of all South Africans to share in the country's wealth, its land, and work to realize the right. The task of building a non-racial society remains fundamental to work of our movement and the broader society. Through our policies, programs, and practices, we need to advance non-racialism in ensuring that every South Africa appreciates their equal, irrevocable right to call this country a home. All South Africans must feel that they have a future here, nowhere else. The ANC, as the author and guardian of the Constitution of the Republic, will continue to safeguard fundamental freedoms of all South Africans, both black and white. The point is fully expressed in the preamble of our Constitution, where it reads as follows. We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to build and develop our country, and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. We therefore, through our freely elected representative, adopt this constitution as the supreme law of the Republic so as to heal the divisions of the past and establish the society. The ANC is clear on its position of creating a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous South Africa. As the ANC, we have said it, stated firmly that our people must enjoy the benefits of this country, be it from a different class, gender, age, language, or geographical location. And it is clearly stipulated on our Strategy and Tactics 2017. Chairperson, one must say that whatever that we have experienced in terms of violence on black and white, black on blacks, gender-based violence, social ills, need to be condemned and reprimanded. It must come to an end that every time people respond to issues on a populist approach when things are on the public domain. But when people are suffering close to their door, close to their houses, close to their streets, you cannot see them as other members. We want to condemn these mobilized, organized marches that seeks to undermine this democracy. Honorable Chairperson, one must say that as the ANC, we condemn the issues of farm attacks. And it must not happen, not in our name, and it must not happen while we lead as the governing party. Chairperson, as the ANC, we want to tell the country and honorable members that for us, all lives matters. No black, no white, no colored, no pink, but all lives matters. Honorable Chairperson, the unfortunate problem with the EFF is their myopic rhetoric that they display political freedom, yet they exposes their intellectual bankruptcy. On the other hand, we have DA, of which they have a problem of acknowledging the fact that as the ANC, we're still dealing with the patterns of apartheid. But the fortunate part of being members of this house is the fact that ours is not to create a discourse, but to create an enabling environment where one sees all races, sex, class with one lens. We cannot hesitate to underline the importance of the existence of the correct leadership at the moment of revolutionary change. With the same breath, energy that we used to attend to the recent farm attack in Senegal and Beckenfell High School, we must attend to those happening in our household, in our streets, in our communities, even if they don't have publicity. The ANC wants to reaffirm the fact that our Freedom Charter stays clear that South Africa belongs to all who lives in it, and it continues to emphasize that people shall share, people are equal before the law, and that there shall be peace and security. Honorable Chair, I want all members of this parliament and the society at large to note that the Freedom Charter speaks about the people, not the few. Indeed, if we all have South Africans' interests at heart, we must all forge unity in action for better South Africa and prosperous country we're dreaming of. Better lives for all, not for the few. I like what Honorable Singh have noted with regards to COVID. And one can confirm that COVID pandemic has actually indicated that as South Africans, as different races, class, and sex, when working together, we are able to save lives, we are able to preserve livelihoods. Social cohesion and community building are unavoidable if all of us commit to being patriotic, constitutionalist, and revolutionarist. More especially of us here in this August House. We have taken an oath to represent all South Africans at all times, 24/7, 365 days. Honorable Chair, I want to emphasize to the whole country that to deal with this national agenda of non-racialism, non-sexist, and prosperous South Africa, all families, street committees, ward committees, civil societies, and ourselves, hence must be on deck. We must be benefactors and beneficiaries of this particular national agenda. In closing, Honorable Chair, I wish to remind ourselves of the ANC 2007 Strategy and Tactics document, which mainstreamed the spiritual philosophy of Ubuntu and its inheritance values of human solidarity, equality, freedom, and justice for all. It called for the creation of a truly united, democratic, and prosperous South Africa, in which the value of all citizens are measured by their humanity without regard to race, gender, and social status. We are hoping for a South Africa that all languages can be used as equal, where one does not need to switch to any tongue to communicate with other tribes or groups. The South Africa that we are dreaming of, it is a South Africa where all we revisit these values and actively and collectively works towards the renewal of South African soul and spearhead on a path of creating our national democratic society. Honorable Chairperson, one must say that indeed this particular debate was unavoidable. I thank you, Chairperson.
Your time is expired. Thank you. Honorable members, may I request you that you, when you are on the virtual platform, that you switch off your television set sounds or also the radios that surround you. It's causing a feedback and it's making it very difficult to follow what is taking place on this platform. The next speaker is the Honorable Brink.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the Honorable Gungubele for raising this issue and commend the statesman-like manner in which he's handled it, despite the differences between our parties. Today, the meaning of non-racialism is contested, but the DA believes that it shouldn't be. If South Africa is an open society, then non-racialism must mean exactly what it says, that in this society, we do not assign rights and duties to people based on race, that the law and the state will not treat people as group representatives, that nobody will be subjected to the degrading practice of racial classification. We are either an open society or we are a tribalistic society. We can't pretend to be an open society and share in the economic benefits that have historically accrued to such societies while hanging on to the tenets of tribalism. Neither is tribalism a cure for economic injustice and exclusion. Apartheid was a form of institutionalized tribalism. What Verwoerd tried to do was freeze in time and space the divisions, prejudices, and economics of the 19th century, even as the ground was shifting beneath his feet. Not only did the system of racial classification and discrimination deny individual freedom and agency, it also denied the economic interests that people have in common across the color bar and despite the color line. Today, the ANC's argument is that to undo the harm of apartheid, we need to retrace its steps, including the use of racial classification and race-based policy. Many people outside of politics, in business, the professions, and academia have come to accept this idea of racialism while calling it non-racialism. But the contradiction is starting to show. Here in post-apartheid South Africa, a Cape Town advocate who happens to be Black and female cannot serve on the Legal Practice Council because the quota for her group has been exceeded. A netball team is to stop playing and forfeit a match because for a moment there were too many Black players on the court. Companies that want to do business with government are disqualified from even placing bids because too many of their shareholders come from racial minorities. This happens at a time when municipalities and other organs of state need all the skills and expertise they can procure to keep the lights on and the water flowing. Other examples of where shared South African interests are undermined by racial policy abound. From purges of engineers at Eskom to an empowerment partner in a state contract being appointed on the recommendation of a cabinet minister. These policies and laws don't achieve redress. They divide South Africans, destroy social capital, and in fact, undermine the ability of the state to play a developmental role. They try to freeze in time and space the divisions, the prejudices, and the ideology of a bygone era, even as the ground is shifting beneath our feet. The DA proposes an alternative. We believe that the choice between non-racialism and redress is a false one. We can be a society that rejects race-based policy and a society that fights for economic justice and inclusion. Redress policies do not require people to tick an African box or a colored box or any other box in order to be effective. If we look at people's circumstances, we can get a better impression of actual disadvantage. Using non-racial redress policy, we can measure our progress against human development goals. This will break the exclusionary pattern of a small elite being benefited over and over again to the exclusion of those who are really in need. The last point is about cohesion, something we can nurture if leaders stopped treating life in this country as if it were a racial zero-sum game. Broad social cohesion across different groups and classes has significant economic benefits. When people trust each other, care for each other, and feel a shared sense of destiny, they sacrifice more and invest more instead of constantly hedging their bets about the future. Recently, California, the most diverse of the United States, voted in record numbers for two propositions. First, to elect Joe Biden as president. Second, to uphold a constitutional ban on racial discrimination, whether it be positive or negative. We can't compare ourselves to California in every respect, but maybe as one open society to another, they send an important message about the meaning of non-racialism. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Gungubele. The next speaker is the Honourable Gungubele.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I just want to say, I want to express my gratitude to the majority of members of this Parliament for today acknowledging and come and converge on the undisputed fact that our Constitution is a product of accepting that it's only through a non-racial, peaceful, non-racist, united society that we can guarantee correcting the iniquities of the past. Our movement has always been very clear that, Honorable Mulder, there is no mutual exclusivity between correcting the iniquities of the past and building a single nation. The critical thing that all groupings have been called to understand is that what must be the uppermost in our mind is the nation we want to build and the factors that undermine the possibility of building that nation. I want to give commendation and to thank most of the parties for acknowledging that. For acknowledging that in a chaotic environment, in an environment of fear, in an environment of paranoia, we will never correct issues of poverty. We will never address productive development that change the lives of our people. For acknowledging that. Of course, I will come to somewhere else. I just thought I was addressing Honorable Mulder on that one. I just want to come to Honorable Brink. Again, you see the difference. I listened to Honorable Mbele. What he actually denies has existed just now. Honorable Mbele has acknowledged the principle of non-racialism and understand what is being addressed by this country without attaching any qualification. You live in your own world because I have been to George. You are condemning in the manner articulated, both in the Constitution and in our laws. But where you are ruling, blacks continue to suffer, their services continue to go down, but you preach in your paper in the recent conference things that you don't live up to. That is the challenge. If we all agree that non-racialism is the ultimate end, we must correct the iniquities of the past, because that end and the past, correcting the past and building the future, there is no mutual exclusivity on those. And I want to thank all other honorable members for acknowledging that what made our forbearance honorable members to love unity. It's because they understood that a successful South Africa is when leaders of the highest note understand that you must address if the authentic fears, even those of your worst enemy. Your worst enemy must know the future South Africa is also his home by acknowledging what he is fearing. But he must be made to understand without correcting the frustration and hurting of those who were at the receiving end in the past. That non-racial South Africa cannot be built. Now, my last point, towards moving to the end, I want to say quickly, a debate like this cannot pay attention to street kids, because in the street kids, there's no velocity, there is no order. Especially if you come to this debate, having it in program, you don't listen to what is being said. Agent provocateurs, we knew them in the struggle. They pronounced the noble goal of our people, but they acted in a manner that disrupted it. Because in a violent, intimidating situation, there can never be development. It's only agent provocateurs who accept that. I want to close again by saying, I call upon all South Africans to imprison themselves in a dream of a South Africa that works towards the well-being of its citizens, which is a conqueror of exclusion and marginalization, that will have secured all its people's sense of belonging, that will be grounded on the bedrock of trust within itself, that will be offering all its people opportunities of upward mobility. In closing, our constitution is an upward ladder to a dream nation which our forebears laid their lives for. Again, I'm calling upon all those who are at the top to hold tight the ladder and not to kick it, and those who are at the bottom to climb the ladder and not mock it. The future must be constructed now. Conditions now must be correct for the future, because the future in the future cannot be constructed. You make it now for the future to be realized. I thank you, honorable members, and I thank all members for very constructive engagement in this.
Thank you, Honorable Gungubele. That concludes the debate on the subject. We shall now proceed to the first order of the day, which is the consideration of the report of the Portfolio Committee on Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs on the petition pertaining to the role of the religious community in COVID-19 crisis. I now recognize Honorable Gadebe of the ANC.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, kunzima ukukhuluma after such a profound umkhabulo from Honorable Gungubele. Honorable Chair, it is also worth noting from the onset that this petition has been overtaken by the events. The country is currently on lockdown level 1, but be that as it may, we are still duty-bound to unpack issues raised and recommendation as proposed by the Portfolio Committee then. On the 8th of June 2020, the Portfolio Committee received a petition from Freedom of Religion South Africa, also known as 4SA, on behalf of religious leaders and organizations. The petition called on the committee to facilitate a greater involvement of the religious sector in regulations governing the national government response to COVID-19 pandemic. given that the committee is the custodian of the Disaster Management Act, its regulations and directions. In response to the call, the committee requested and received a briefing on this matter from the Department of COGTA on Wednesday, the 24th of June, 2020, including briefing from the petitioners themselves. 4SA was grateful for the opportunity to have an audience with the committee. Its submission was as a result of great uncertainty regarding the application of various regulations directive in respect of religious leaders and its organization. 4SA stated that none of the levels of lockdown stages mention the role of religious sectors, except for food distribution, other social relief, presiding over funerals. Honorable Chair, 4SA also argued that their petition was as a result of lack of response from the President, the Minister of COGTA, the Portfolio Committee itself, and the National Disaster Management Nerve Center. While issuing Level 3 regulation and directives relating to the norms and standard of religious gathering has since covered the question for clarification on standards of religious gathering has since covered this matter. The 4SA request for engagement and involvement in the consultation for the remaining stages of lockdown were still relevant. Furthermore, there were still various ambiguities in some of the clauses in relation to Level 3 regulation, including the status of religious leaders as essential workers, whether the definition of churches includes home, whether the religious gathering includes drive-in gatherings. These required clarification in order to avoid dire legal consequences for religious leaders and organizations. Once again, the petitioners at the time indicated that the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs had not responded to their request for clarity. The outcome of 4SA seeks to achieve through the petition the phased reopening of religious sectors across the different levels, similar to those of the economic sector. The petition also envisaged an opportunity for senior level representation of the religious community under the 4SA umbrella in government's consultative process, as the views of the religious structures governments currently engaging with did not necessarily encompass those of the religious organization under 4SA umbrella. The response from the Department of Cooperative Governance. In its response, the department submitted the following. Government was cognizant of the vital role the religious community in the time of COVID-19, including the distribution of food parcel, social work, counseling services, supporting victims of gender-based violence, as well as care and relief for activism, most of them which are vulnerable. The department had...
Time is now expired. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The next speaker, the next speaker is the Honorable Opperman.
Thank you, House Chair. The committee observations states that 4SA could have raised their concerns directly with the President and the Minister of COGTA, since the committee were never directly involved in the drafting of any of the regulations and was therefore not in the best position to attend to the petition. Yet, the reason why 4SA approached the committee as the custodians of the Disaster Management Act was as a last resort, for they did raise their concerns directly to the President and the COGTA Minister on various occasions without receiving any substantive reply. The committee resolved in its recommendations that the department must respond to 4SA queries immediately where it had not done so. In general, the department must cultivate the habit of responsiveness, even if it's just acknowledgement of receipt of correspondence. On the 4th of August 2020, 4SA had a meeting with the COGTA Minister, but have to date and 5 letters of inquiry later, plus an open letter from senior religious leaders, never received any reply regarding the issues raised during that meeting. So despite the COCTA Portfolio Committee instruction to immediately respond to 4 essay queries, all 5 letters to the minister went wholly unanswered. This is unacceptable, given that 4 essay represent 18.5 million people from a cross spectrum of churches, denominations, and faith groups. The religious community have various burning issues which result in an ongoing limitation of their constitutional rights. 4SA once again asked the committee to ensure the department respond to their questions and feel it is clear that the department is not interested in replying or engaging unless pressure is applied on them. As a result, the impression remains that the religious sector is not that important to government, even though this sector has served on the front lines in terms of caring for and providing much needed social relief to vulnerable communities. The onus thus rests on the COCTA Portfolio Committee to hold government to account and ensure that the religious sector is treated with the same level of respect, interest, and engagement as the rest of the economy. Treating casinos and sub-beans better than churches, mosques, or temples is unreasonable, disproportional, and unjustifiable, as the religious organizations has constitutional rights. The CRL is a Chapter 9 institution mandated to protect the rights of religious communities in South Africa, should be at the forefront in engaging with the religious sector to determine in which way the Commission can assist the sector to make sure that their rights are protected during this unprecedented time. Yet they were nowhere to be seen unless being specifically invited to a meeting like when the petition was discussed. This does not raise the CRL's already limited credibility in the eyes of the religious sector. The practice of a person's faith is of critical importance to their human dignity and overall well-being. It is therefore important that the minister urgently give clarifications on the matters raised by the religious leaders regarding clarifications on the regulations and directions as applicable to the religious community on alert level 1, so they can understand it and start to implement it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is Honourable Kaiser.
Very much, House Chairperson. The worst mistake that would have been committed during level 3 was to allow more worshippers to gather than it was necessary, and government having to succumb to the pressures of inactivity of congregations and to a larger extent religious leaders. Our view, Chairperson, is that people must be allowed to participate in religious activities in the manner in which they see fit, and not be pressured to congregate even at the most crucial and most dangerous period, such as COVID-19. Religious leaders must play their positive role in society by establishing new platforms where they will safeguard the people and themselves against the spread of the virus, and not rob them of their belongings, and including monies, in the manner in which we have seen lately. We need religious organizations that must build within their communities the necessary technologies and platforms which should be able to allow congregants to gather while ensuring safety in line with the regulations, where people observe social distances and are taught to wear masks regularly, rather than recklessly calling for more defined rules where physical activity is encouraged, than prioritizing health and safety measures. We cannot allow for gathering that will endanger the safety of our people. And in times of crisis such as COVID-19, religious leaders should be the ones who must take the communities through the regulations and Section 31 of the Constitution to protect the rights of people to belong to religious formations while not trapping the vulnerable to more danger. Furthermore, religious leaders and organizations should, during this critical period, also allow for the counseling of family members who have been directly affected by the loss of their members, where majority come from poor background and cannot afford professional counseling. Chairperson, we call on religious leaders as part of the leadership in society broadly to play a positive role to protect our people and still provide spiritual guidance without endangering their lives of our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Ngumalo.
Thank you very much, House Chair, honorable members. House Chair, can I just say that I'm delivering these remarks on behalf of Inkosi Yasemathuleni. Chair, the recent period of hard lockdown necessitated by the COVID-19 global pandemic was an unprecedented and unexpected one, and therefore a time for great challenge for our government as it scrambled to put into effect legislative precautionary measures in order to ensure the minimization of the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. The petition received from the Freedom of Religion in South Africa, FOSA, on behalf of approximately 18.5 million people across a broad spectrum of denominations, churches, and religious organizations, was not only in regards to clarification of the role that the religious sector could play during this time of great national disaster, but also a request to facilitate a greater involvement of the religious sector in the drafting of the lockdown regulations. It is said, Honorable Chair, it is a sad day, Chair, that indeed when our religious organizations are ignored by our government. So as the IFP, we believe that in times like this, when there is great national distress, the religion has got a very serious role to play. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Thring. The Honorable Thring.
Thank you, House Chair. The ACDP at the outset would like to compliment FOSA for raising these pertinent issues in their petition to the Cooperative Committee. The role that FOSA plays as activists and protagonists of freedom of religion is commendable and must be applauded. Indeed, if the democratic principle of freedom of religion is undermined, suppressed, or removed, it will not be long before other freedoms or rights are removed as well. As Chair, the ACDP is on record for calling for religious leaders to be declared as essential workers during the stringent lockdown periods. We also agree with FOSA that various ambiguities existed in some of the clauses at level 3 regulations, such as whether drive-in gatherings would flout the regulations at the time. Additionally, it made no sense to limit churches and other religious groups from distributing much needed food to our communities when the President of South Africa himself said that government lacked capacity to distribute food parcels, not forgetting at the time those selfish politicians who stole, hoarded, and sold food parcels meant for the poor. This act in itself could have resulted in more people dying from poverty and hunger than from the virus. When the maximum number of religious gatherings was set at 50, but other sectors not, the ACDP spoke about this anomaly and hypocrisy. The raising now of the number to 250, while your casinos and supermarkets, shebeens, and other institutions have no such restrictions, again reveals the ambiguity and hypocrisy of the drafters of the lockdown regulations. The ACDP calls on the minister to lift the moratorium on schools renting their facilities to religious groups. These groups in schools can and would comply with the stringent health and hygiene protocols, and hence there would be no need for this discrimination of churches and other religious groups in schools. It is the view of the ACDP that the maximum number of 250 people attending for the church and other religious groups is an overkill reaction from the minister, as the church has in place stringent sanitation, hygiene, and social distancing protocols, which your airlines, shebeens, and supermarkets don't necessarily have? Why should a church with the capacity to seat 5,000 people, for example, be limited to a service with just 250 congregants present, while your casinos and others in the business sector can take 50% of their capacity? Is this not hypocritical and discriminatory against the church? It is the view of the ACDP that the prohibition of the laying on of hands during prayer, baptism, and communion is unreasonable. Given that there is an opportunity for the use of surgical gloves, as well as adhering to the necessary health and hygiene protocols during these religious practices. The ACDP agrees that the recommendations of the Committee for the Department to immediately respond to forces queries where it had not done so, in order to cultivate a habit of responsiveness, the committee and minister must note that the church is not an enemy of the state. Do not make it through ambiguous, hypocritical, and discriminatory regulations. I thank you.
The next speaker is the Honorable Sheikh Imam. Honorable Sheikh Imam, are you on the platform? The next speaker is the Honorable Sheikh Imam. The next speaker is the Honorable Sheikh Imam. If the Honorable Sheikh Imam is not on the platform, the next speaker is the Honorable Sheikh Imam. If the Honorable Sheikh Imam is not on the platform, I recognize the Honorable Mutambi.
Honorable Chairperson, it's Singh here.
Honorable Singh?
He's probably having a problem that he discussed at our other fora of being in two sessions at the same time. Thank you.
Yes, but then they must alert us. The Honorable Mutambi? Is the Honorable Mutambi on the platform? If not, honorable members, then we'll continue with the second order, because that concludes then the debate on the first order.
Chair, Honorable Chairperson.
Yes, honorable member. Honorable Mpumza.
Chairperson.
Honorable Mpumza.
Yes, Chair, I'm there on standing on behalf of Honorable Mutambi.
Please proceed.
Can I proceed,
member.
Chair?
Yes.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, the African National Congress would like first to express its heartfelt condolences to all those who succumbed to the coronavirus pandemic-related illnesses. Concurrently, on the same vein, Chairperson, the ANC commends the National Coronavirus Command Council chaired by President Cyril Ramaphosa. This gesture, Chair, goes beyond excluding religious and traditional leaders and the citizens of our country for the huge role they have played following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Having said that, Chair, the ANC knows the petition brought by the Freedom of Religion in South Africa relating to the role of the religious community in the COVID-19 crisis. The petition called for the committee to facilitate greater involvement of the religious sector in the regulations governing the national government response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The ANC also appreciates the response given by the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs On the main, the department's response entails the issuing of the permits to the religious leaders to perform essential services and food distribution to vulnerable communities, solemnization of marriages, definition of the places of worship, drive-in gatherings, sale of educational material, as well as access to the Unemployment Insurance Fund. The ANC policy broadly allows religious leaders to play a huge role in promoting nation building and social cohesion, including schools and the early warning for discrimination, and therefore plays a critical role in the moral regeneration as a contribution to the democratic society that is non-racial, non-systemic, that we are building and we seek to build. The ANC urges the department to respond on the issues that were still in need for clarification and address the shortcomings identified in the Freedom of Religion South Africa petition. The ANC chair therefore supports the recommendation of the Portfolio Committee on Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. That concludes the debate on this report. I will now hand over to the Honourable Mashlauli, who is on the virtual platform, who will continue presiding over this session. Honourable Mashlauli. If the Honourable Mashlauli is not there, I will proceed to the second order. The last order of the day, which is the consideration of the report of the Portfolio Committee on Communications on the 2020-21 first quarter performance and expenditure report of the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. I will now recognize the Honourable P. Faku.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Greetings to yourself and to honourable members. I rise on behalf of the African National Congress to express our support for the report of the Portfolio Committee on Communication and Digital Technologies on the 2020-21 first quarter performance and expenditure report of the department. As this House considers the report, it is important that we do not lose sight of the context. We're meeting in the week the national broadcaster, the SABC, has dominated the news and headlines. The SABC was the main story of its own news programs. As members of the Portfolio Committee on Communication and Digital Technologies, we learned through the news that the SABC news employees at Auckland Park embarked on a go-slow, with some refusing to go on air. As a heated meeting erupted on Tuesday over the threat of retrenchments of 400 staff members. Less than 24 hours earlier, the SABC reported a loss of 511 million for the year 2019 and 2020 financial year. The public broadcaster has been heavily criticized by the Auditor General for incurring irregular expenditure of at least 5.4 billion, which led to a qualified audit opinion. For the second year running, we must recall that the SABC received a disclaimer in 2017-2018 financial year, which is the worst possible audit outcome. The SABC received a bailout of 3.2 billion during the financial year of 2019-2020, wherein it was tasked to develop a turnaround strategy focusing on revenue generation. While the SABC matter are worrying and need urgent attention, the report only about the SABC. We're tabling the report of the Portfolio Committee to make observation about the performance of the department and the entities over which it maintains oversight. The department and its entities performed very well during the past financial year, where DTPS obtained a clean audit. We observed that the height of COVID-19 response team was established, which ensured that temporary spectrum was released by ICASA to ensure quality of broadband services while South Africans worked at home. This team also proactively responded to fake news on social media. The committee noted and was pleased about the progress that has been made, most importantly, the project the department has embarked on since the reconfiguration of the government in the sixth administration. The department is finalizing its organizational structure that must be completed by 2021 in March. The ANC is especially proud of the stellar record that has continued to be led by Centec in ensuring that South Africans receive signals both on radio and television, whilst the entity maintained a clean audit for 5 consecutive years. I wish to conclude by calling on all parties involved in the SABC dispute to seek a negotiated settlement as soon as possible. As the ANC were encouraged by the posture of the Minister of Communication in discouraging retrenchments, we believe everything possible must be done to ensure successful turnaround of the SABC and save jobs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Now I recognize Honorable Mackenzie from the DA. Honorable Mackenzie.
Right over the session. Thank you.
Thank you, House Chair, and good afternoon to you. All protocol observed. Firstly, allow me to thank all members of this portfolio committee for the spirit of multi-party cooperation, good humor, friendliness, and the shared desire to act in the best interests of all the people of this country. It is a pleasure to serve with you all. After an unfortunate incident in January, I was essentially away from Parliament for nearly 3 months. Before I got shot, the department and entities appeared mostly to be in robust good health, with sound leadership at board and executive levels, strategic plans in place, and well on track to meet their respected mandates. Yet when I returned to work 4 months later, the 3 main entities that form the multi-billion rand foundation upon which this department rests, namely the South African Post Office, the SABC, and the State Information Technology Agency, or SITA, were and are making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Boardroom shenanigans with entire boards dissolved and replaced with directors that lack any institutional or continuity knowledge of the entities they lead. Board chairpersons appointed by the minister, then fired soon after for refusing to bow to the minister's dictates, and interference in the day-to-day operations of the entities by the minister, seeking to influence and direct operations. In this light, the South African Broadcasting Corporation and the South African Post Office stand out as perfect examples. The question to be asked is what happened to the entities that used to have sound leadership installed and were moving in the right direction? What was the catalyst for their apparent collapse? Now, while it's tempting to slip into the Wuhan virus blame game, we really can't lay this at the feet of COVID. The minister, her ignorance of the law and the extent of her powers, as well as her ill-considered decisions, are almost exclusively to blame. And finally, House Chair, I'd like to address the matter of the Post Bank and the South African Post Office, which has not tabled its financial report so far this year. When I asked the Office of the Auditor General during committee why the SAPO hadn't tabled their financial report, the response I got was, ask them. Well, perhaps the answer lies here. A recent High Court judgment showed SAPO's year-to-date loss at the 31st of July 2020 was 1.066 billion, while only 55 of the Post Office's 1,416 operational branches are profitable. Once again, landlords are locking post offices for non-payment of rent, the latest being Highveld Post Office in Centurion, Parkview Shopping Centre and Menlyn Park Retail Park also remain shut. The fact is that the South African Post Office is completely bankrupt. In their haste to start a state bank on the back of the Post Bank, a very successful business as it stands at the moment, the ANC committed a series of cardinal blunders, most of it because they simply didn't do their homework. One of these is the realization that the Post Office without the Post Bank is hopelessly insolvent and cannot continue as a going concern. The SAPO is broken, and what's worse is the minister has no idea how to fix it, besides sticking her head in the sand and hoping time flies and her term comes to an end. Moving to the SABC, the situation of retrenchments at the broadcaster is now highly charged, understandably very emotional, and mired in confusion and misinformation. The minister and the ruling party have known about the impending financial crisis at the broadcaster since at least 2018. Yet she's brought no new initiatives to the table and done nothing except pontificate in public around the fact that no one should lose their jobs, but without presenting any alternative solutions and instead directly contradicting the board. It was with a sense of amazement, therefore, that I heard the minister tell the portfolio committee yesterday to, and I quote, come up with alternative solutions to the retrenchment process at the SABC, close quote. This points to the sheer incompetence of an intellectually bankrupt minister who is paid millions a year. With an entire department and a couple of special advisors paid over R1 million a year each as part of a royal retinue, is this really the best the minister can do in dealing with the traumatic matter of people's lives and livelihoods? 700 million rand will not come from Treasury to fund these salaries. They just don't have it. The good ship South Africa is flat broke. The heart-wrenching clip of a South African Broadcasting Corporation journalist breaking down in tears just brings home how deeply personal these decisions are that we take that directly impact the lives of our people. In this time of record unemployment, due more to disastrous anti-economic policies than the useful excuse of COVID-19, in this time of record unemployment, every job that can be saved must be saved. Where retrenchments are unavoidable, though, through every step of the process, we will continue to monitor the fairness of these developments very closely. Minister Ndabeni Abrams is well paid to ensure the smooth running of
Thank
this
you, Honorable Member. Your time is up.
and the entities that report to it. It is on that record that she's judged and on that record that she's found wanting. The Democratic Alliance supports the work of the committee and the contents of this report. Thank you for the indulgence, House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Now I recognize Honorable Bambo from the IFP, from EFF.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Let's take this opportunity to address a matter that is that this department has failed to deal with, and one which has now captured the attention of the broader public. Although the matter before us is the annual performance plan of the Department of Communications, it would be foolish of us to ignore the collapse of an entity under this department's jurisdiction, which is explicit proof of a lack of planning and incompetence. Chairperson, the South African Broadcasting Corporation is in the process of retrenching over 400 workers as a result of gross incompetence by a leadership collective that has no imagination to lead the entity. In what can only be regarded as an emotionally abusive act of terror, the SABC reneged on its own commitment yesterday to put an end to the Section 189 process, which initiates the process of consultations for retrenchments. The decision has been reached by a board and executive that is by all metrics self-admittedly failed to turn around the financial situation at the SABC. The executive, which earns over 42 million annually as a collective, has decided that their salary bills are worth more than the livelihoods of 400 people. However, it does not end there. The high salaries of those who have decided to retrench workers has brought with it 511 million in revenue loss for the financial year 2019-2020. The critical question that should therefore be posed to all of us is, what is the purpose of retaining an executive and a board that has failed to fulfill its mandate? If the leadership of the SABC has exhibited incapacity to turn around the financial situation at the SABC, why should they be retained, whilst the staff that has provided award-winning programs, quality news coverage and content be retrenched? Why? The fact of the matter is, this board and its executive has no believable plan of rescuing the SABC and providing strategic leadership to it. The fact that they believe that retrenchments are a solution to the revenue problems of the SABC shows that there are no future prospects of a turnaround strategy, and the SABC is doomed for failure under this leadership. 6 months from now, when the SABC reports more financial losses, this very same board will come to us and report yet another retrenchment process, because their agenda is clearly to collapse the entity and deprive millions of South Africans of a fair, objective content from a public broadcaster. We must therefore, as a matter of urgency, disband the board of the SABC for the divisions it showed yesterday, which represent a huge crisis. The CEO and COO of the SABC must be suspended, and a commission of inquiry into the structuring of the salary packages of the current board and its executive ought to be established.
This must be accompanied by a commission of inquiry into the activities of this board and their attempts to fix the situation at the SAPC, if any. Furthermore, this parliament must demand of the department to put a complete halt on the Section 189 process. It cannot be that the department pleads ignorance and solidarity in the public when it has the oversight and jurisdictional powers to intervene on the inhumane situation at the SAPC. The new leadership at the SAPC must be given a decisive mandate on leading the SAPC out of a financial ruin, not one that is self-destructive, narrow, and will add to the spiraling unemployment crisis in South Africa. As a matter of national importance, the SAPC must be put an end to the illegal.
Honorable member, your time is up.
To the illegal must carry obligations it has with subscription broadcast entities, particularly MultiChoice.
Thank you, honorable member. Your time is up. Thank you very much. Now I recognize Honorable Majosi from the IFP.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Although the report under consideration was drafted to reflect the many achievements of the department, not enough emphasis is placed on the fact that the department could not even achieve half of its target during the period under review. Less than 50% of targets achieved should be a cause of concern in any department, but even more so, one responsible for the nation's communications, and even more so during a worldwide pandemic when face-to-face communication was not always possible. Areas of underachievement of concern to the IFP include, among others, that a performance management system for ICASA councillors was not conducted as planned, that SAPC implementation of the turnaround plan was not conducted, and that detailed analysis of the ICASA 5G study report was not concluded. The SAPC and ICASA both have essential roles to play in the communication sector and are mandated to work in the public interest. The department can ill afford to neglect these entities. With regards to budget program, ICT enterprise and public entity oversight achieved none of its 6 targets. How then can this program justify its expenditure of 449,203,000? By far the greatest expenditure over the first quarter, and have nothing to show for it. The purpose of this program is to oversee and manage government's shareholding interest in the ICT public entities and state-owned companies. If no targets were achieved, can we then assume that no oversight or management took place in a country where none of the greatest threats of our economy is the losses incurred through corrupt practices? Is this not an open invitation for those in an appetite for public funds to take advantage? Those responsible must be held accountable and would do well to remember that if they are not able to achieve their targets or produce verifiable results, such as programs might find themselves out of the cold when the proposed zero-based budgeting is implemented. The IFP further supports the recommendation pertaining to SAPO and will monitor developments in this regard. Regarding the USASA, I am sure you will agree that much work still needs to be done to ensure all South Africans are able to connect, speak, explore, and study using ICT. With this consideration in mind, the IFP accepts the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, honorable member. Now I recognize member from the UDM, honorable member from UDM. UDM. We will proceed, honorable members, to ATM. Honorable member from the ATM. Honorable member from the ATM. It seems like there's none. We'll proceed, honorable members, to Honorable Sheikh Imam from the NFP. Honorable Sheikh Imam. Honorable Sheikh Imam. We shall proceed to Honorable from the AIC. There is none. Honorable member from COPE. COPE.
Hello? Yes.
Honorable, it's your turn now, sir.
Honorable Chairperson, thank you very much. I must indicate that number one, COPE welcomes the report. We support the report that has been given to the meeting here. But then on the issue of the SABC, we're extremely disappointed. SABC belongs to the people of South Africa. It is owned by the people of South Africa. And ourselves as the representatives of South Africans, ourselves here in Parliament, we have sent the Deputy Minister to go and represent us on the board of the SABC. And I must acknowledge that she has been doing an excellent work. She goes, she comes back to us, she reports, and on very many occasions, she has been downgraded. She's not, her positions, which means our positions are not even recognized. The management of the SABC do as they wish. Now, it is not the first time, for example, that they are expelling people. They've expelled people in the past on very many occasions. We have risen. I mean, I've been on the portfolio committee now for more than 10 years. And we have seen what they've done. They have expelled people and they use the money that, for example, in Parliament, we give them to upgrade, to make sure that there is a movement forward. But then they use that money to employ lawyers so that they can just deal with the workers in whatever way they want. They go to, all the structures where they can be able to fire workers. This is wrong. Let me indicate that a person, particularly the African people, one person takes care of at least 10 members of the family. Now, if they say they fire 600 people, it means 6,000 people are going to go hungry. But now they've gone down to say they will fire 400. It means 4,000 people will be hungry through and through. Now, this is actually, I must say, is nonsense. And you, ourselves as Parliament, if we don't rise to stop this thing, we are not getting anywhere. Those in management get millions, let me emphasize, but then those who are ordinary people who carry cameras and move around get about 10,000 rand a month. And the management doesn't care about them. We are aware that even the board has not agreed, they differ, but then they don't even care whether the majority of the people, and the majority I'm referring to almost 60 million people of the people of South Africa, they don't care whether we say no or what. My child, our children, you chairperson, and the children of people in KZN, in East London, all over the country, want to watch Generations, want to watch Mubango, they want to, or you want to watch the news, etc. But then the management there say whether you want that or not, whether the people there are qualified or not, they must just be kicked out. I therefore am saying that if we allow them, ourselves here as Parliament, if we allow that management to go on like that, then we shall have failed. We shall have failed the people of South Africa. Let us stop that management. They're just out of order, or we must fire them ourselves as Parliament. Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Member. Thank you, Honorable Member. Now I recognize the member from the PAC. Member from the PAC, Honorable Member. It seems like there's none. Al-Jama, Honorable Member Al-Jama. We shall proceed, Honorable Members, to Honorable Gambo from the ANC. Honorable Gambo, over to you.
It's not Honorable Gambo, it's Honorable Gumbu. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The Department of Communication and Digital Technologies is central to the modernization of the South African economy and upgrading our network industries. This modernization is part of the long overdue reforms that are necessary to unleash the potential of our country's growth and development. The African National Congress welcomes the report of the committee, which reflects a mixed bag of results. In fulfillment of our oversight function, it is critical that we focus on the commitments of government. Among these is the allocation of high demand spectrum. And we are pleased that this will be completed by March next year. As the President pointed out in the opening address to the third investment conference, the allocation of spectrum will enable new investment in our telecommunication and infrastructure and open the way for a digital economy. It will contribute towards lowering the cost of data, which remains much higher than some of our peer nations in Africa, although we fare better than some developed countries, including the United States, Switzerland, New Zealand, and Canada. Chairperson, we commend the entities of the department that have performed well, such as USASA. The entity was exemplary in terms of achieving the target of paying 100% of valid invoices within 30 days from the date of receipt. This is important, particularly for SMMEs. We support the call on the department to ensure that USASA provides adequate services to rural areas. As part of the drive to integrate government, the committee has recommended to government to make use of CETA services for ICT procurement processes to avoid the inflation of prices. We believe that digital technologies can support economic inclusion by breaking down barriers to information, broadening access, and lowering the level of skills needed to participate in the economy. Of course, this does not mean that everyone and everything should be connected or digitalized. However, we know that these technologies are the single most important driver of innovation, competitiveness, and growth. They hold a huge potential for entrepreneurs and the SSME. Unlike other parties that seek to perpetuate apartheid patterns of exclusion, the African National Congress members in the committee are unapologetic in our stance that the benefits of the digital economy must reach the entire population, particularly the Black people, women, youth, people with disabilities, and rural areas. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Thomas Gumbu. Fellow honorable members, that concludes the debate and business of this virtual mini-plenary session. The mini-plenary will now rise.
Long live Chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank